This is such valuable stuff. And I gotta tell you, as the parent of a relatively large family,
relative to what?
everything. You guys are the tip of the spear. You guys. Parents, we might be the shaft, but you guys are the tip of the spear. And it is, I can't tell you how grateful I am as a father to know that people with your kind of passion are teaching my children things that, I'm sorry, I'm here, I'm feeding them, okay? I can't teach them. And Lord knows my wife would love to. I mean, in fact, during the pandemic, we cloistered and home taught them for 410 days at home. That's what we did. Okay, that's what we decided to do, and home teaching. And so we're in favor of 1,000% raises for violinist. My brother plays the radio, and my younger sister is a violinist down in. Well, for a trombone player, he's a great doctor. Okay, so anyway. And so we all grew up in music. My dad, now, and here's the thing. My dad taught junior high school band and orchestra at Woodbrook Junior High School in the Clover Park School District, Tacoma suburb. And the junior high school just happened to be on base at Fort Lewis, Washington, which is now Joint Lewis, Fort Lewis McChord. If you can imagine a junior high school band teacher who is dying to build some kind of a program in an environment where the families move every 2 years. And his band and orchestra, we used to go to the concerts and those bands and orchestras. Oh my goodness. And he did it year after year after year after year. Got his master's degree and wanted to go into administration, but that never happened. Yeah, he was a beloved teacher, and he wound up being the last original teacher of Woodbrook Junior High School when he retired. He was the last one that was there. Anyway, as I told this group down here, I am the father of 18 children, 8 of whom are still in the public school system. I have 25 grandchildren, and you guys are remarkably calm for having heard me just say all of that. If I need to repeat it. And so we've had quite a bit of experience in the public school system. But let's start here. Let's start with the biggest challenge that you are facing coming into this new school year. Okay? Think of this biggest challenge. What is it? Rod?
I think the biggest challenge that we're running into right now is after COVID, a lot of students and even some parents feel like classroom attendance isn't an important part of education.
Is not
an important part. So as a result, we have lots of students that are absent a lot or show up late, and they don't put the emphasis that they need on being in the classroom. And our first goal is always to do what's best for the student, but we can't teach the student if the student isn't in the classroom.
Okay. What else? Denise?
I think the biggest challenge since the pandemic is behavior issues. We have kiddos that have sporadic attendance, and we see a lot of behavior because they haven't learned the rules in the classroom.
Does that really have to do with knowing the rules in the classroom, or is it deeper than that?
It could be deeper than that.
How so?
I see a lot of students that have anxiety issues. because of the pandemic. And then just maybe the importance of school and learning the rules, like, and having those rules reiterated at home and having parent backing.
Karen?
I really think the biggest issue that we're facing in schools right now is we have every single student in the United States that's been through something extremely traumatic.
The pandemic?
Yes, the pandemic. And also I feel like some of the adults in their lives have not modeled kind and empathetic behavior. So I feel like our students are in some ways living in a state of trauma. And I feel like this is why we're seeing a big increase in behavior issues, is that our students don't feel safe. And I think our schools are safe, but I think for them, when one of us is out sick for a while or we have something going on that we can't be at school for a week or two, they assume that we're going to either die of COVID or that we're abandoning them. And I feel like we're seeing some really deep psychological impacts of the pandemic right now in our schools. And I feel like combining that trauma with the pressure that they feel to catch up a year or two at a time, even in our very, very young grades, they're feeling a lot of anxiety and they're feeling a sense of failure when we talk repeatedly about how they're behind. And so I feel like one of the things that we're kind of dealing with is just student mental health issues from a post-pandemic world. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges we face this year is supporting all of the adults who work with students so that they can be emotionally available to meet those students' needs. Because I agree with what my colleagues have said here, that our students are definitely dealing with some post-traumatic stress. And so we need every adult who is facing students every day to have the emotional depth and maturity to work really well with those kids. And getting them the support that they need as they've gone through the last 2 years so that they can best support students. Because the bottom line is, we all want students to succeed. We want them to do well. And that requires whole adults working with them who have their needs met.
Kristen, talk to us.
So one of my biggest concerns for the school year is the critical shortage of substitutes and our support staff that we need for schools to run. It's not just students and teachers in the classroom. We know we have learning gaps that we need to make up, and our paraprofessionals are absolutely crucial for that. It's really hard to make accommodations for the different levels in your classroom and then not have that second person to help with that instruction. And we had hundreds of paraprofessional jobs and other support staff like our bus drivers and our lunch workers go unfilled last year, and this year it's looking even worse. And that's really scary. And even our paraprofessionals that we did have last year were pulled to substitute. So we still didn't have them in our classroom with that extra support we need. And our class sizes are so large that putting all of that on one teacher is just way too much. I know in my world history classes, I have kids coming below a first grade reading level, and I have kids on a college reading level, and I have students that don't speak English as their first language.
And you're it.
And I'm it. And
That's it. You don't have anybody else.
no, so having those paraprofessionals in the room where their focus is solely on the student and not on the instruction and the assessment, I think is critical for our kids to make the learning gains that they need to make.
Hunter, why? Why are teachers leaving the profession?
Oh, what a good question. I think this is an incredibly stressful time for everybody. As my colleagues have said, it's very stressful for the students, for the teachers, for the administration, for the districts. And I think as a whole, there's not a lot of solutions for all the problems we're seeing, not just in Utah, but in this country. So,
Name some of them.
oh, where do I start? I think a lot of the issues come from funding. I think we lack the money we need, again, as a whole in this country to kind of do all the things we want to do, to hire new people, to retain people. But yeah, I'm sure one of my other colleagues could add on to that.
Well, you know, you bring up something interesting, and we'll get back to the emotional things of this, but Rod or Denise, either one of you or both of you, talk to me a little bit about funding. I mean, I was looking as we were preparing for this, the weighted pupil unit in New York is like $28,000 per, yeah, and then you look at Utah, and we're right at the bottom there with, what is it, 8,000 something?
Even with our increase, we had a nice increase.
So, when you look, I mean, there is a disconnect somewhere, and I'm not sure where it is. Maybe you guys have an insight on this. I mean, what is it that New York State and its $28,000 weighted pupil unit can do that Utah, with its $8,000 weighted pupil unit, can't do?
I think the issue of funding, I'm almost 30 years into this, and the issue of funding has always been an issue that we keep bringing up. I've seen what's happened over the last couple of years where the legislature's been good at changing some of the funding and adding, and which has allowed us to get professional mental health people into the schools and some of these other things. We've seen some advances that have really been useful, but we're so deep into a hole that it's going to take an awful lot of effort in order to get us up to where the funding will have the type of impact that we'd like to see it to have.
Describe that hole.
The whole is, one, drawing in teachers. I know within my district, my area, I'm more rural. It's when we put out job openings for particularly math, English, some of those areas, we're lucky if we get one, maybe two sometimes, people that actually are certified and qualified in that area. Recently, we fill a lot of spaces with people that are working toward getting their degree, and they come into the profession excited, prepared, not prepared, but excited. And the problem is when they try and juggle the preparation with doing what they need to do in order to be an effective teacher, they're so overwhelmed with just the day-to-day with the classroom, plus having to catch up and do everything else, that after 4 or 5 years of struggling, they call it quits. With facilities, materials, technology, where it seems like we're always trying to play catch up with getting what we need in order for the students to have the very best. But I will say, in 30 years of teaching, one of the things that's always surprised me is how well the teachers are able to do as much as they can with what they have. And I think part of that is a dedication to education. It's almost a sickness. Once you go into teaching and you have that beauty of watching kids grow and light up, it's hard to leave the classroom.
I have a couple things on funding. Since I have taught in a different state that does pay significantly more per pupil than Utah is paying. And the hugest difference I see is in the support staff. At my middle school here, we did not have paraprofessionals until our school community council started to pay some of that land trust money into bringing in those aides. And then we've used some of our ESSER funds and other COVID monies to continue that along. The funding is class size. When we look at all of our teacher surveys coming out of Utah, it's time. that teachers are hurting for and wanting, and that goes directly to funding. The larger our class sizes are, the less time we have. The less time we have per student, the less time we have to give feedback, the less time we have to give communication to families, all of those things that are so, so critical.
Well, and heaven help you if the student has some special needs.
Well, that increases the number of students you also have in your class that do have those
So
special
what's the
needs.
average right now? What, 31?
Well,
What is it? Somewhere
the
between
class size
28?
average is really hard to talk about because the formula is putting all staff in the building into that and then dividing the students. So they may say it's 31 or 32, but in sixth grade, at least where I'm at, it's 36 for a lot of
Wow.
teachers. And
And
then they're
just
seeing,
the teacher.
right, and then they're seeing 5 classes of that. So you're looking at 180 students that you're communicating with and giving feedback to. And they're packing those classes up because of the lack of funding. Also, another thing that's hurting us in Utah with the lack of funding, and when we're talking about the mental health needs of our students and how they've increased so dramatically, we don't have another level for those kids to go to. We don't have enough spots in our special education programs or in our behavior and emotional support classrooms. We need another layer of that, a whole nother layer that just is not there, that needs to be created, and that's going to take money. The last thing I wanted to say that has to do with class sizes as well is capping our special education classrooms. We don't cap them like many other states do, and so they're getting to the sizes of our normal classrooms, and they're supposed to be filling the gaps so that these students can make up. And they're really becoming de facto behavior classrooms. You can't put 24 kids with high needs and individual needs, not the same needs, in one classroom with one teacher, and again, often without an aide, and expect those gaps to get filled. So we are really, that's where our funding comes in. And the politicians talk about bang for the buck. Utah, we get a lot of bang for our buck. That bang is on the back of their teachers.
Okay, we've talked about challenges, classroom attendance, behavior, post-pandemic issues, and the trauma students through, teachers with emotional support, shortage of teachers and staff, and you've been very eloquent. I want to know, with all those challenges, why the heck are you a teacher?
I do what I do because I love what I do. When I go to work, and my 2 boys will tell you in a heartbeat, oh, she's doing school stuff. I get up in the morning and I get excited to go and work with my kindergartners. Kindergartners to me are the best. These guys will all disagree. But they come in with that excitement of, I'm at school and what are we going to learn? And they are like, they love everything. They may not like what I'm asking them to do, but when we talk about why it's important and how it's going to make them a better person, that makes me excited. I get excited. I'm going to cry over talking about teaching kindergarten, but I love teaching kindergarten. I've done the other grades. I've student taught that. I didn't like it. Kindergarten for me is where it begins. And if we don't give those little ones a love for school and a purpose and a reason for being here, then these guys get all the behaviors and they're like, oh my gosh. But that, if it doesn't start at the beginning, they're not going to enjoy it. And I do it because I enjoy watching them be successful.
Mike, we have not heard from you. Please tell us, with all of these challenges, why do you teach?
I've asked myself that a lot lately. Unlike a lot of these people, did not get an education degree coming in. I started out in academia. I got 2 master's degree. I was a Fulbright scholar. And I looked at what I was doing at the university, and I thought to myself, I can be making more of a difference at the secondary level. Most of the people in my family are educators, and I've always respected everything that they were doing. And I really appreciate the feedback that I get from my students. I appreciate the relationship I have with them, the things that I'm able to do with them. And I always feel more successful as a human being when I'm able to share things and interact with them and affect their lives in a way that you can't do if you're not an educator. It's a very important part of who I am, and I'm really happy that I made that decision, despite everything we've been talking about.
In those quiet moments in the car on the way home, after a tough day, where nobody wanted to cooperate, nobody would be quiet, and it seems like the administration was on another planet taking care of other issues, right? What is it that gets you back up What is it?
I can always find a positive thing that happens during the day. There's always something that happens where a student is making me, they make me laugh, or I've learned something, or I can regroup and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this differently. The kids, that's what takes me back every single day. And I just love being with students, and when they have those aha moments, and when they love, they'll say, I have this whole bulletin board that has pictures on it, and it says, I love you, Mrs. Wilmore. Thank you for teaching us. That is what brings me back. And there are days when I open up that closet and I see those posters and those pictures that kids have given me over the years.
Our job is so full of hope and so full of possibilities for the future. And I think at the end of a really tough day, when I'm driving home, I think about the experience that I have and what a gift it is to be able to be involved in teaching someone skills to make them independent and so that they have a successful life later on. Mm-hmm. And I love the possibility that we have to see people start in one place and blossom into their biggest potential and become the fullest form of themselves they can by the end of the year.
Sounds like a sickness to me.
I was like sucked in. It was so beautiful.
Certainly you have seen colleagues who say, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. I am not well. I have to take a sick day just to recover from the ongoing issues that I have to, it's like the stone of Sisyphus almost. You're pushing it uphill and it's always, always, always there. What do you tell teachers to kind of help them work through that and come back to where Karen and Denise and Mike and Rod and all these other sick teachers are?
These were the challenges that the pandemic brought upon teachers. As an instructional coach, I sat with teacher after teacher as they were in tears. And then they wiped their tears and got back to work. And so we talked a lot about building boundaries between work and home. We built skills to keep work into a 40-hour work week so teachers could have more work-life balance. Because teaching is a little like parenting. It will take as much as you give. So you have to figure out what are my boundaries, and so that I can do a great job here in the school, and then I can go and live my full happy life with my family and not let that school life kind of bleed into my family life, and then the family life just disappears, it gets shortchanged. So just the nature of teaching, because it is such complex knowledge work with young people, it requires boundaries. It requires teachers to think through what is most important, what is my priority, where will I get my biggest bang for the buck as a teacher? Is it in, I'm going to give great feedback, I've got to get this planning done. What is it? Because you can't do it all.
How do you find that balance without losing your mind?
It is part of your identity, part of who you are, and even within our communities. How many people do you know, other than doctors where somebody wants free medical advice, how many people do you know as they're walking through the aisles, somebody comes up and says, oh, how's my child doing? What's their scores? Are they missing any assignments? How many people do you know where you haven't seen somebody for 10 years and you really don't have a clue as to who they are, and they come running up to you, hi, how you doing? And they're all excited and they want to tell you everything they've done. I mean, how many professions do you have little kids run up, Mrs. Lake, Mrs. Lake? How many professions are like that?
Yeah. Yeah. If you are the job.
Right.
I mean, and teachers, I'm sorry, I grew up with them, they raised me, okay? And I know for a fact that they were the job, whether they're getting paid for it or not. Mm-hmm. So how do you figure out how to not go crazy?
It's really hard, right? I think there's a sense of martyrdom that comes with being a teacher. Like we've said, you kind of become the job. So if I don't do it, who is going to do it? I have to do everything. It's me, me, me. But I think something that's been really important for me in this past year is figuring out okay, if I'm not taking care of myself and setting boundaries like Sarah said, and making sure I'm very intentional with my time and my efforts with my family and with my students, if I'm not helping myself, I can't help those kids effectively. So
You got to sharpen your own saw.
yeah, you gotta, yeah, great, I've never heard that one, but you gotta sharpen your own saw, right? So I think it's just super important to take care of yourself so you can help others effectively and then create great little scholars while they're in school.
We are the job, and we care about our students unconditionally. I think we would do anything for them, and the students know that. They know their teachers care about them. The administrators know that. They know we care about them. The thing is, we have a lot of hats that we wear as educators, and a lot more hats than we used to wear. There's a lot more things that are put on our plates as educators, and we're happy to do most of that, and it's really frustrating to us when we can't keep up with our responsibilities, because we really do care about the outcomes. We really do care about those students as individuals. We want them to succeed, but when we don't have paraprofessionals and when we don't have the aid we need for behavioral issues and for all kinds of other things, it just makes it really, really difficult for us to be successful. And that weighs on people, and I think that's a big part of why people get out of the profession. It's not just the money, which is important too. When you treat people like a professional and when you trust their decision-making processes, that's very important. But not being able to fulfill our mandate to reach those students, I think, is a big part of why people give up and go somewhere else.
Do you feel supported by the administration? Whether it's at your school individually or by the district? Do you feel like they have you in mind?
I think the administrators are caught in the same trap that teachers are caught in, with limited resources, limited things that they can actually do to, for example, a principal has absolutely no control over being able to hire a half a dozen aides. Districts don't have that kind of control.
Who does?
It's money coming down through the state legislature to those districts, and the way it's earmarked determines how much you can spend in different areas. So that makes it difficult on their end. When you have, for example, in a rural area where you only have one principal, or maybe somebody that's trying to be both a half principal and a teacher, responsible for behavior issues, management issues, all of those other things. It's putting a lot of weight on that individual, and unfortunately a lot of the training programs for administrators are management based and not leadership based. So as a result, they time restrictions put them in a position where they're always trying to figure out where things go instead of having the time to help people and teachers and students get what they need in order to be successful.
I'm interested in hearing the dynamic that goes on between the ranks of the teachers who are on the front lines, in the trenches, day in and day out, looking behind them for, I need more ammunition. Come on, where is the ammunition?
Administrators and teachers have a lot of shared interests. They care about the students as much as we do. They don't stop caring about the students just because they become administrators. It's nice to have more money, but that also carries a lot of responsibility sometimes. We have a pretty good working relationship with our district administration, and I know that it hurts them when they're not funded properly and when they're unable to give the teachers the ammunition, as you say, that they need to go out there and do their jobs effectively. It hurts them. I've seen them cry. I've seen them really show that they care about this as much as we do. They spent their time in the trenches. They know what it's like to be unable to fulfill your mandate as a teacher, and they know what it's like to not have the tools you need to be effective in your profession. And I think most of them would bend over backwards if they could to make teachers' lives easier. We don't always give them the tools that they need to do that.
When I moved here, I was a bit surprised at the fact that the furniture in my room was probably 25 years old. And I didn't have bookshelves. I went and bought my own bookshelves. And When a teacher moves into a classroom, if you were to walk into my second grade classroom, you would see this beautifully decorated, and I'm sure Denise's room is that way as well. You would see a beautifully decorated room with books for kids to use and a lot of different supplies. And guess who paid for those? I did. Or I wrote a grant for them. So, but I do know that in my district, the Davis Foundation is working really hard at supporting teachers and making sure that teachers are not taking out of their own pockets. But there have been times where that was I could, so I did. But I think that people are really working hard at getting resources for teachers so they have those resources in their classrooms.
We're talking about in the classroom itself or in the office or whatever it might be, and we're talking about motivation. And I think what I'm hearing from each of you, and regardless of whether it's your relationship with the students or your relationship with the administration, whatever it might be, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what we're talking about. A love of the students, a love of learning, a love of a sense of mission, a sense of accomplishment, having people run up to you, Mr. Hearn, how are you? I'm sorry, I don't remember you, but great, how you doing, you know? What are you doing now with your life? That love, that spark, you know? How do you preserve that? How do you preserve it through all of everything that we've been talking about? We haven't even talked about all of it. I mean...
So I had a student in my classroom about 6 years ago, and she was working on some behavior issues. Really sweet little girl, but had some behavior issues, and I worked really hard with her. And I had other students in that class that had behavior issues too, and there were many times in that year that I cried. It was tough, and I felt really discouraged. And that this little student moved away, and I haven't seen her since. And this past spring, I was in Smith's grabbing something from my classroom just before school, and this 6th grader came up to me and said, "Are you Mrs. Wilmore?" And she told me her name, and she just said, "Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Wilmore." And those are the things that bring us back, like Rod was saying. For me, I didn't think I made a difference in this child's life, but just by having her come up and talk to me, she reassured me that I did. So, and it is great love that brings us back to the classroom.
I think we all know the power of education because we experienced how much it changed us. And so we feel confident that even though we are putting drops in a bucket, we may not see the impact now. We know what we do has an impact. So on the good day or the bad day or the long day or the short day that went by without going to the bathroom, you know you're having an impact because your education changed you. So what we do matters. We know that.
We do what we do because we love who we work with and for. I always tell my kids in my class we're a family. And when one person in your family hurts, the whole family hurts. And I think every one of us in this room would agree, regardless of that love, they are your family. And I tell my kids all the time, boys and girls, I'm not happy. And they'll go, what can we do to make you happy? And then they try and fix that. But being honest with those little 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds makes a difference. They're my family. My boys will say, you have your family at our house and you have your family at school. And they tell their teachers, well, we're a family at school and we have a family at home. And I think that's what's most important. I'm not trying to take away from parents because I need their support just like their children need their support. And I think every one of us in here would agree as well. We can't do it by ourselves. Sorry, here come those tears, you guys. We got to have those parents support us as well. If you're not happy with something that we're doing, come to us as the teacher and ask how your child is doing. Just that little bit of interest for me lets me know that you care, and I know I have a support system at your home.
I think it can be really difficult because not all families are afforded the opportunity to be heavily involved with their students' lives at school. So I think parents are as involved as they can be. Maybe sometimes we would like them to be more. I'm sure they'd like more from us as well. But we're all on the same team, and we're all working to just make their kiddo successful and to help them grow and thrive and feel loved and supported. So I think everyone, all of us, we're just doing our best to support the kids. And it might look different for one family than another, but I think we all know at the end of the day, we all love their kids and just want them to be supported and successful. So
I actually give kids bonus points for bringing their parent into class to sit through class. Most of the misunderstandings that I've had, and there haven't been a whole lot, but the ones where parents are willing to come in and talk to me, it's usually about a 15, 20-second conversation before we begin ironing out the misunderstanding. And we're on the same page, and it's easier for them.
We understand that it's really hard to get involved in your students' education, in your children's education. We work 80-hour work weeks. We know exactly what that's like. We know what it's like to have 2 jobs, most of us. We know that it's really hard to stay involved, and I know my children have probably suffered because I'm a teacher. I'll say it. But if I could say one thing to parents, it would be that there is a very high degree of correlation between children's success and the involvement of their parents in their education. And the families that do care and the parents that do get involved and talk to the teachers and collaborate with the teachers, that makes so much of a difference that I can't even express how much that means.
This is such valuable stuff. And I gotta tell you, as the parent of a relatively large family,
Relative to what?
everything. You guys are the tip of the spear. You guys. Parents, we might be the shaft, but you guys are the tip of the spear. And it is, I can't tell you how grateful I am as a father to know that people with your kind of passion are teaching my children things that, I'm sorry, I'm here, I'm feeding them, okay? I can't teach them. And Lord knows my wife would love to. I mean, in fact, during the pandemic, we cloistered and home taught them for 410 days at home. That's what we did. Okay? That's what we decided to do, and home teaching. And so we're in favor of 1,000% raises for all of you because we got to step into your shoes just a little bit in terms of trying to educate them and seeing that spark of understanding and enlightenment open up on them. We got to enjoy that just a little bit. But just a little bit. Homeschool is a difficult thing. But, and so to wrap up, I want to say thank you so much for doing for our children what we could not do. We can't do that. And so thank you so much for everything that you have done to move them down the court.